You know, if you guys are anything like me, you probably grew up watching the Bassmasters on TV. I remember coming home from like long fishing days with my dad, and I was so psyched up about fishing, whether it was bluegill or anything, catching catfish, and you turn on the TV, and pretty much all you find is bass fishing. I mean, bass fishing is where it's at. There's no denying that. And I started to idolize, you know, a lot of these guys and learn about it. And I was probably just like you guys, like, what are they using? What are they using? What do they got tied on? Or what time of year it was? And I have my notepad. You can ask my parents. You ever run into my dad at an expo and you can say, hey, was Nick always obsessed with this? And he's going to be like, it's ridiculous. And I had all these binders. I would pull out the information from the Bassmasters. I'd highlight it. I'd take it to my mom's teacher store and get it all laminated and have it organized. And it was all about this bait for this time of year, this bait for this time of year, and not necessarily why. And this is going to lead me into talking about this month's Monster Bass bag. It is now, not a box, it's a bag. And it's about Bassmaster Classic winning baits. So a lot of the baits in this month's box were from Bassmaster Classic winners, baits that they used. And the reason why it's important for what I'm actually talking about right now is historically, I don't know who won every single event on what bait. I mean, I probably started really focusing in on the information of who won on what bait, where, when, how, and why when I was a teenager, and I was born in '79. So a lot of these baits that we're actually going to talk about, these are baits that Guido Hibden won on, Hank Parker won on, Davey Height won on, the Davey Height victory I remember, KVD won on, you know, and so on and so on. And a lot of these baits included in here. Why this is critical for you is you need to understand that bass lures are tools. Was the first hammer made the best hammer to today's standards? No, absolutely not. But the first guy who made the hammer and properly learned to utilize that hammer was better than anybody at it at that time. And it's important that you actually understand this and wrap your head around it, because you're going to understand the basis of exactly why that person was using it and why it's so significant to understand the baits that you're getting in this month's bag. Let's start off here. Let's start off with a popular bait. This is the KVD 1.5 square bill. Kevin actually won, I believe it was on the Louisiana Delta around 2011, maybe 2011. I'm not sure. This is a bait he designed, the 1.5 square bill. Was this the first square bill ever made? Absolutely not. Is Kevin one of the best square bill fishermen on the planet? Absolutely. If you can win a cranking tournament and that guy's in it, chances are you're all in trouble. This bait right here, bouncing off shallow cover and structure, causing reaction strikes. Now, if I let you watch a 2-minute video, okay, on how to fish a square bill, do you think you can go out and compete with KVD? No. Bass fishing's all about the information. He understands the nuances, the line diameter, the rod angle, the speed he's retrieving it and stopping it at. So when he came into developing this bait right here, the KVD 1.5 square bill, if you haven't used it, definitely take it out and use it. You're gonna love this bait. But what's unique there is this is a guy that's drove this style vehicle forever and then designed his own vehicle. Now, you can wrap your head around that and think what you want. You can say, oh, I'm sure I can go out and compete with those same guys from learning from a 2 to 5 minute YouTube video. Bass fishing is complicated, guys. Chances are you're not gonna beat KVD unless you really put your head to the books and focus on learning to use a bait like that. Let me grab something else here. Berkeley trialing. I'm a P-line guy. I have been for the last probably 10 years, but Berkeley trialing is something I grew up with. This is the XT, right? Like, I think it's like stands for extra tough. I'm not sure. I could be wrong on that. I think we all grew up using this. It accounts for 15 plus Bassmaster Classic victories, something like that. I read that. I don't remember that, okay? So that's 12-pound diameter. Now, just with a little bit of information right here. So most baits, so the KVD 1.5, I believe it's 3 to 5 feet. Yeah, 3 to 5 foot of depth. So that's on 12-pound line. Most crankbaits are tuned and measured on 12-pound diameter line. Okay, that's the diameter, the thickness of that line, not just the strength. So if you measure the diameter of that line, you'll understand. So I believe the average cast is roughly 85 foot back, so 3 to 5. This thing's probably gonna hit 5 feet with 12-pound diameter line at full distance cast. So if you go to 10-pound, it's gonna drop down deeper. These are all things that you should know that you're not gonna learn in 2 minutes, guys. So wrap your head around bass fishing right here. Here, take a look at this right here. This is a 3/16 ounce Stanley jig. Now, Guido Hibden, a Bassmaster Classic winner in, I believe it was in the 80s. Is that even important for you to know? Maybe if you're a bass fishing historian, go back and check it out. Now, Guido was actually very well known for finesse fishing. Now, the fascinating part about a 3/16 ounce jig is it's gonna fall much slower than you're used to. If you watch any jig video out there, you're gonna see that, oh, okay, put a crawdad trailer on the back, you're using a 3/8 ounce, you're using a 1/2 ounce, and you're gonna throw it up there, let it sink, and you're gonna catch them. Well, according to every video I watch online, if I watch bass fishing videos for 2 hours, I should be able to go out there and compete with the best of the best. The unique part about Guido's victory with that Stanley jig right there was actually throwing it up on the bank and dragging it into the water. Then it would hit and it would have a slow fall, so a slower rate of fall for how light it was. And he was actually triggering bass into striking on that because he specialized in finesse jigs. Was this one of the OGs of jig fishing? Yes. Is it the best on the planet? I don't know. Maybe for you. For Guido, I'm pretty damn sure he'd probably say yes. Now, another unique bait, the hail craw right there. I'm not sure if that's focused for you. This was a bait that actually disappeared. And I believe it was Hank Parker's first Bassmaster Classic victory. If you look at that right there, it is a worm with craw appendages on the end. And Monster Bass actually brought this out of retirement. This is a bait that disappeared, and I believe this by itself, Texas rig, is what Hank Parker actually won on, flipping do-nothing banks. And do-nothing means there wasn't timber, there wasn't rock piles, it was turns in the river, and he was flipping it in just a turns in the river. Well, what does a turn do? It eddies, okay, in a river, which means the water's gonna hit there and it's gonna turn off. Therefore, it's gonna mix up bait. Bass are gonna actively feed in those areas, which means it wasn't a super active bite, because if he was flipping a worm style craw right there, that means he had to be pretty subtle with it, working down that bank right there. But Monster Bass actually brought this bait out of retirement, which is really cool, because just like any bait in the bass fishing industry, people are gonna make variations for it. It's gonna lose its luster. It's gonna not be as popular at one time, and a lot of times some of the best baits actually disappear. Check it out, here's another bait in the bag. This is a Gambler bacon rind right here. I'll pull it out. Now, this wasn't the very first creature bait, all right, but creature baits were just starting to get very popular. You can see that kind of looks like a brush hog right there. Now, you can figure out which one came first if you want to do the history yourself. Now, Davey Height was actually flipping this near weed beds and then swimming it in. I believe he was using it like a swim jig style. You can see that big curly tail on there like that, and that's gonna get a lot of action. And that was a completely different look. And I remember actually having some of these. I don't know who uses them nowadays, but oftentimes you can go to a new body of water and give the fish an entirely different look by just changing your bait up. And that's a freaking classic winner right there. So if you think that you didn't get your favorite bait in the bag this month, what you need to realize is every one of these baits has won on the highest freaking level there is in bass fishing. The Berkeley chigger craw, all right? This is probably one of the most famous flipping baits of all time, and a lot of guys like to flip this in the colder water because the appendages are very thin, all right? It looks like it has a ton of displacement. It doesn't. It's very subtle. You got to break those pinchers apart. It flaps very subtle, so it doesn't have much displacement, but it has a lot of profile. What does that mean? It shows them something that's not super aggressive, a lot of displacement like a chatterbait or square bill, a lot of the time it's not going to trigger those very cold water fish. For example, Boyd Duckett with a combination of a rattle trap actually won in 2007 another Bassmaster Classic, where he was catching his fish on a rattle trap early and then started flipping the chigger craw with a 1 ounce pegged weight. And peg just means that weight can't slide up and down your line, and flipping it to trigger those kicker bites throughout the day. 1 or 2 big fish were eating the chigger craw, and he was able to combine those with, you know, 2 or 3 of his other fish to make his best 5 bag total to get those bigger fish and walk away with the victory from that tournament. So I want you guys to really wrap your heads around the historic information included in this box right here. Stanley, there's Stanley hooks in there, needlepoint hooks. Now, if you guys don't know about Stanley, Stanley was not a Bassmaster Classic winner, but he was a legendary bait developer in the bass fishing industry. This goes for a lot of guys. Mans, I don't know if Tom ever actually won a Bassmaster Classic. I could be wrong, but he created tons of famous baits. Stanley with the needlepoint hooks, the jigs. You have legendary bait maker guys that take their baits up to the highest level, and then you have guys that are just outstanding researchers. This is what I pride myself on, is being an outstanding researcher. I'm not the most hardcore competitive guy. I would rather go out there and figure out what I can trick the bass on that day, that situation, and it's not necessarily always about the biggest bass for me. And then you have these famous bait developers, you know, like Stanley here. So the hooks you get in your bag right here, these were like straight shank needlepoint hooks right here, and this is before we had all that straight shank with the keeper to keep your creature bait pinned up at the top. So understand the significance of what you received in this month's bag, and look at it, and go watch back, see some of this historic footage of these guys winning on these baits, and understand they specialized in this, and a lot of the guys were behind some of the development to these baits and how they use these baits that was unique to their style. It's not simple. Bass fishing was never meant to be simple. Unless you're going out there and looking to have fun, go ahead and throw a wacky worm all day if that's what you want to do. But if you want to really get ahead of the competition and learn a ton, do some information, this month's bag is very unique. I'm absolutely stoked to get out there and use some of this new stuff and use some of this old school stuff. My boy Alex Rudd's got a new custom painted square bill in the bag. I've never tried it, but I'm probably gonna go out and whack some fish on it here in a minute. Thanks for watching, guys. Make sure to subscribe to Monster Tackle Box. If you haven't yet, you're missing out. Later.